What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we are back. It's time to build some wheels. It's going to be pretty easy. Just get the stuff from your Andy Mark 14U5 box, and then we'll get started. But as always, before we do, special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this possible. Okay, pretty simple build this time. We're just going to get the wheels prepped. You can actually do this anytime you want. And just leave the wheels off to the side until we're ready to actually put them on the chassis. You'll need your 6 Andy Mark high grip wheels. There is a bag inside there. This has the pulleys, the timing pulleys that we're going to use on these wheels. There is a bag of screws. These screws are, I guess, don't know how to describe them best, but on the head, there's a hex and a slot for a flathead screwdriver. We're definitely going to use the outside hex for this. And so what you're going to need to tighten these in is a 1/4 inch socket. And then finally, we have a bag of bearings. We're not going to use all the bearings in this step, but we're going to use most of them. Okay, first step then is, let's go ahead and get our bearings here opened up. That was one of the ones we needed. Oh well, we'll go get it in a second. So there are 2 types of bearings in this bag. And we talked about this earlier when we were working on the chassis. There are ones with a flange. So there are these ones that have this extra lip on the side here. And then the ones where it's smooth all the way across. So we need the ones that are smooth all the way across. They'll be labeled 1614ZZ. The ones we don't want are FR6Z. So those are the flanged ones. The F stands for flanged. So we can move those out of the way. Also open up our other bag here and get our stuff. We're going to end up making 4 outside wheels and 2 inside wheels. So these 2 metal pieces are just for our inside wheels. I'm going to set those down. We'll do those second. Okay, and these pulleys go together. So these are halves of pulleys. If you look carefully on them though, there is like a raised bump. And then there is a recessed hole on the opposite side. So if you just kind of put them together wherever you want, you usually will end up with an extra little gap in the middle that we don't want. So line up the groove or the bump with the recess, and it should go together and sit flat. You'll feel it kind of like really nest together. That's what we want. So take one of those. We're going to line that up on the wheel. So just put that down on top of the wheel. It will be able to rotate a little bit, but that's okay. And now we're going to take a screw and drop it in and just give it a little bit. We're just going to give it a couple of turns. And then I like to get all of them started that way. So I'm going to do all of them just a couple turns so I know they're in there and they're started. And when we're doing these screws, we're actually cutting directly into these holes on the wheel. And so there are no threads in the wheel. So as we tighten these in, they're going to cut their own threads, which means this is going to be a little bit tiring. It's gonna take some effort. If you have more than one socket, you can definitely have more than one person working on these. So once they're started, now what I'm going to do is take one of them down to tight. So this one I'm going to tighten all the way. Okay. Then the next one that I'm going to do, I'm going to jump across. So really, you can go straight across, you can go a little bit diagonal, but don't do one of the holes next to it. So the idea here is just like if you change tires on your car a lot, you want to tighten the lug nuts in a star pattern. That ensures that the pulley is going to be sitting flat on the wheel. If we just tighten one side down, we might pull it crooked, and then the other side might not be able to pull it back flat. So by going across this way, then we're going to come across to the farthest one away. It's going to help keep it even when it tightens down. So every time we move on to a new screw, basically pick the one that is as far away as possible from the one you just tightened. We're almost there with the first one. All right, one down. We're going to repeat this process 3 more times for our outside wheels, but there is another way you can do this. If you have a drill and a bit that would let it connect. I think that's over here. So it could connect to the socket. And I need a battery, of course. There we go. You can use this and your socket to drive these in under power. Now, you have to be careful though. We are screwing our metal fastener into the plastic wheel. If you just go crazy full power, you can end up doing damage. So if you're not comfortable using the power tool, my recommendation is just go ahead and do all of them with the socket by hand. It's, it might take a little longer, but it is safer and it's not that bad, right? But if you're gonna do it with the drill, we follow the same process, line up the grooves in the holes, get this started. And it's the same way. I like to get them all in a little bit so I can actually kind of get the first little twist by hand. I might even use the socket here to get the first bits going, just so I know they're all set and ready to go. So I might still come in here and just do the first couple on each one by hand. This also is going to help ensure that they're going straight into the hole and not crooked, which is easier to do with the power tool. Okay, and then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my drill onto screw mode instead of drill mode, and I'm going to set the clutch so that at some point it's going to clutch out. So if I set the clutch all the way down to the number 1, like the drill will not spin if there's any kind of force applied to it. So I'm going to start somewhere low and work my way up. And each drill is different, so I can't really give you a setting. But I want to have this click out before it gets really down and tight. So you can see there, it started clicking and I'm not all the way down, so I can go up a couple, see what happens. Go up a couple more. Okay. There we go. So the key is at the bottom, it still needs to click. So that got down and tight, but I wasn't able to keep tightening it because the clutch is tripping out and stopping me from doing too much and damaging it. And then, after it's in with the drill, you can kind of do all of them with the drill, but go back through and test them by hand just to make sure they feel good. All right, so that felt pretty good, so let's go ahead and finish this one up and the other two. Okay, we have 4 of our outside wheels done. Let's finish those off by putting the bearings into them. So the outside wheels, the 4 outside wheels, are going to get a bearing on both sides. So one of them is going to go right into that pulley that we built and put on. And usually you can get this one to go just by wiggling it back and forth. Okay, and then on the other side, we're going to put a bearing into the wheel hole. Now this one usually is too hard to push in by hand. If you don't have any tools, you usually can just put it face down on a piece of wood or a table and just push. Try to push evenly, and there it goes. That's all the way in. You'll know too that like if you look at it, there's like a gap still. It's not like perfectly deep, and that's normal. That's where it's gonna, that's how it's gonna look. So both sides, they're gonna stick out a little bit. This side, it's gonna be about even with the top of the pulley. And then the amount of bearing that you see here is about the same as the amount of bearing you should see on this side sticking out. If that doesn't work for you, let's go ahead and put this one in on the top. If that doesn't work for you, you can hit it. You need to use a soft-faced hammer, not a metal one, because that will damage the bearing. And so if you need to do this, the idea is basically tap a little bit, and it's gonna like rock back and forth as it goes in. So whichever side is sticking up, whichever side is proud is tall, tap on that edge and try to aim right for the rim around the outside. That's the strongest part of our bearing here. So you can kind of work your way around like that, doing soft taps. You can, if you don't have a soft hammer, like mine is plastic and rubber, you can put a piece of wood on top of this and hit the piece of wood. and that's okay. You can also sometimes get a socket that fits on that outside ring, so when you're hitting it, you're still transferring it to the strong part of the bearing. But be careful, if your socket's too small and you're hitting this inside part, this cover or the inside part, that could potentially damage the bearing. You can tell after you're done attaching it too, if you kind of just give it a roll and let it spin, you'll feel if there's any chunky bits or if there's any parts where it's getting stuck. And mine is spinning. That's actually really good. Usually I can't get it to spin that much by hand. So that's 2 of these down. Let's get the bearings in the last 2. And the last one. Which gets the floor bearing. Okay, that is the 4 outside wheels done. We're going to set those off to the side. Now we have our 2 inside wheels, and those are going to be a little bit different. So on one side, we're going to end up using this metal piece. The other side is actually going to be the same as the outside wheels that we've already done. So we can start off by doing 2 more of these exactly the same we did it before. So get that lined up. So this is the first step of the inside wheels. And continue on with your socket or your drill if you're comfortable. All right, so those are in. We can go around and check them, but I think they're good. Yep. Now the other side, we need to take one of those pulleys, and on the inside of the pulley, we need to put this metal piece. Now this metal piece, it's a little tight, so I'm going to just do one side right now, but you can feel when I put it in, it's going to get hard to rotate, to line up after the fact. So one of the things that I like to do with this, depending on how tight yours is, well, this one's pretty tight, okay. If you put the bolts in first, they will kind of help keep everything lined up. So let's see. It's a little tight. There it goes. Okay, then you can try to start pushing this down, and if you wiggle it, mine went in pretty easily. Again, if you have to tap on it, you can. A lot of times I'll flip it over and then tap carefully on the edges of the plastic. Be careful though, if you hit the outside ring of plastic, it will break pretty easily. You can also set this in a vise so that the vise is kind of on the sides here, so when you hit the metal, it has room to go down. Okay, this now has to get the second half attached to it, but before you even start, make sure you identify where the two, where the bump and the recess are, the hole and the raised section. And I'll do the same thing here, is I will start with at least a couple of bolts, maybe you don't need to do all of them. in those two sections. And, you know, I don't know, maybe I'll throw another couple in just for good measure. Then you can try to do the same thing, kind of just wiggle the sides to squeeze it together. And if you're lucky and everything was lined up, it will snap all the way closed and you'll have no gap. If you have a gap, then you got to take it apart and start over. Usually you can just get this started to pull apart in this step. If you have to get this whole section off, the metal part off, usually I start out by pushing down on the table and wiggling it. And then at some point, you can get a pair of pliers or a wrench in there to prop it out, or push on the back with your thumb like I just did. All right, so now I got to redo all of that. Let's go with 3 bolts for alignment here. Okay, and this one's lighter. Some of them have been tighter than others, so if yours is pretty loose, that's going to help. It's going to go in a lot easier. Okay, and let's see. So recess and bump, make sure those are lined up. And we're in. Okay, then this just sits on the wheel. And we're going to screw all of these bolts in, just like we did on the outside. So get them all started by hand. Finish it by hand if you have to. If you've got the power tool, go for it. Okay, and these ones were a little tighter than the other ones, so they didn't go quite all the way down. So what I'll do is I'll come back now and I'll do the last bit by hand. There we go. And the last one. All right, so this wheel looks good. Let's do our second inner wheel, and then we'll come back and finish it up. All right, so our inner wheels are done now. The inside wheels are going to have pulleys on both sides, and one side will have that metal insert that we're going to use to, I mean, that actually goes on the output shaft from our earlier steps. 2 of those. We've got our 4 outside wheels that should be done. Outside wheels will have a pulley on one side, bearings on both sides. And you will notice the inside wheels, we don't have a bearing. We do have 2 leftover bearings. These are those flanged ones that we didn't use yet. These are going to go in the frame when it comes time to assemble the wheels with the rest of the drivetrain. But we're going to leave that for the next video. Before we let you go, though, we are going to give our special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this all possible.